I hadn't remembered much about episodes 5 and 6, so watching them again was a little bit like watching them for the first time. I mean, things would happen. I'd be like, oh, yeah, I sort of remember this. And then other things were like, whoa, I don't remember this at all. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of either episode. This is the part when this was the part when I first saw that when I was first watching the show when I'm like, oh, where's the show going? Like, are we ever gonna see Cooper? Or are we gonna hang around Dougie forever and stuff? Because like this is what 5 or 6 hours into the show, and I'm just like, I just remember thinking, where is this going, and getting impatient. And of course, I'm a little less impatient watching it again because I know how the season eventually ends, but it doesn't mean I'm not still frustrated by a lot of it. I mean, I guess my favorite parts are probably the Dougie parts, because even though I'm not a big fan of Dougie as a character, I've always liked Kyle MacLachlan, so it's interesting to watch him struggle to figure out how to find his Cooper persona, even if you sort of are frustrated by the fact that he never seems to get anywhere near it. Every time he drinks, I remember when the season first aired, and whenever when Dougie first drank a cup of coffee, I remember thinking, oh, is the coffee going to turn him back into Cooper and stuff? Like, is he going to drink coffee and then all of a sudden he's back? No, not really. It doesn't even seem like it makes much of a difference. Like, it's like his senses recognize coffee and his senses recognize the badge on the security guard who's telling him not to be loitering. But other than that, nothing ever seems to make a difference. Ever seems to really chip in Dougie's armor. But it's still kind of funny to see MacLachlan doing kind of acting that way. And I like in episode 5 when the guy gets all the coffee and he gives Dougie like Frank's coffee, and that Frank guy gets frustrated at first, even though he allegedly never drinks his coffee. But then he gets the green tea, and he has a big smile on his face. And so there's stuff like that I kind of like. And even though Naomi Watts as Dougie's wife is always angry at him, it's funny to kind of watch her be so hysterical. Now, what's interesting is I enjoy Naomi Watts' performance in The Return a lot more than I enjoy Laura Dern as Diane. I love Laura Dern and I love Naomi Watts, but I think for me the difference is Dougie's wife as Naomi Watts plays her as sort of comically hysterical. Just she's always angry, but in a way that makes you that's funny. Whereas Diane, she only appears very briefly in episode 6 when Albert goes to see her. But I do remember that in the later episodes, Diane is just pissed off all the time and saying "fuck you, Albert" over and over. And I just remember Diane being kind of negative. I mean, she has, I guess, good reason to be, because wasn't there an episode where Cooper raped her while he was possessed by Bob? I don't have the clearest memory of that. I guess we'll get to that eventually, but I think that's the difference between the two. Is Naomi Watts is just being hysterical, and Diane is just always angry and negative. And speaking of that, I think that's another reason why The Return has always been kind of difficult for me to get into. Is there's just this negativity that persists over the whole season. I don't think Lynch meant for it to be, because Lynch in real life is always talking about how transcendental meditation, which I do as well, cures negativity, and he likes anger and darkness in art. Like, he just doesn't like it in real life. But I think when you remove Cooper and Harry Truman and Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks, you get a lot of malaise and negativity and unhappiness. And that's not really why I liked Twin Peaks. I liked Twin Peaks for the escapism aspect of it. And it seems pretty evident by now that the reason Michael Onkeen didn't come back as Harry Truman was because the sheriff role just didn't have much to do. I had forgotten that Candy Clark was on The Return as Frank Truman's, I guess, wife. I assume now based on the hints we get on social media, she was supposed to be Harry Truman's wife, but because Michael Onkin didn't want to be in the show for whatever reason, Robert Forster had to do that. And I remember Candy Clark from American Graffiti, but I'd forgotten about these episodes where she's just yelling at Frank all the time, and I sort of think that this isn't, this negative, like, I guess that she's mad because of a tragedy that happened in their family. What, their son died or something? I can't quite remember what happened. It's all sort of a blur, and I just watched it. That's why it's so weird. But I don't know, I just don't enjoy watching those scenes of Candy Clark yelling at Robert Forster, and I just in general don't like the new characters. The psychotic kid, and that scene where he's with the gangsters flipping the coin. That's like something out of the Batman the Animated Series or something. And like, I forgot about that scene where the psychotic kid runs over the kid with the big Mack truck. The reason I'm laughing is because, first of all, it's such a random death scene. And then second of all, because of the goofy expressions on all those extras' faces. Like, they're looking at this bleeding kid in the street, and some of them are like looking at him like, with like a hand on their chin, or like some of them like gaping, kind of. Maybe Lynch did that on purpose. He wanted the extras to look kind of awkward and goofy, and maybe the bad acting is the point. Because Lynch tends to like bad acting in some of his work. He likes the unprofessionalism of some actors. But I'm watching that. I'm like, how am I supposed to feel about this? A kid just got fucking run over by a Mack truck. Am I supposed to be sad? I don't, or am I supposed to laugh? I don't understand how to react to this. Honestly, the most moving part of that scene is when Harry Dean Stanton comes in and he sees, I guess, the soul come out of the boy. By the way, Harry Dean Stanton is one of the few returning cast members who actually, I think, his performance totally works. Even though I guess it was only in Fire Walk with Me. I don't think he was on the first 2 seasons. But I had to laugh during that part where he's with the bearded guy in the van, and he's like, I've been smoking for 75 years every fucking day. And the other guy laughs, and I started smiling. I'm like, oh, Harry Dean Stanton, may he rest in peace. I hope he gets to smoke a lot of cigarettes in heaven wherever he is. And so that part works. And I like how Tom Sizemore and Jim Belushi kind of, it's awkward casting how Jim Belushi is a casino boss, or Tom Sizemore is like the sadistic office guy, but they're both the similar kind of actor. Well, maybe Tom Sizemore is a little bit more aggressive, but I always like seeing them on the show. And speaking of Tom Sizemore, Jeremy Davies has this one scene where he's like the gangster that comes to the playground demanding Naomi Watts give them Dougie's money. And I looked him up on IMDb because I'd totally forgotten Jeremy Davies was on The Return. And then it looks like he was only in this one episode. So I wonder why Lynch didn't use an actor of Jeremy Davies' caliber more. I mean, he and Tom Sizemore were both in Saving Private Ryan, and you'd think that connection would have been stoked more. I don't know. I just feel like that was sort of wasted. And, and Ernie Hudson also as the Major, who I guess took over after Major Briggs died. I like Ernie Hudson, but I don't know. I don't really know what he's doing in The Return. I seem to vaguely remember he might be in some of the later episodes, but in this episode he doesn't make a huge impression. I like Amanda Seyfried and everything, but I don't know. Like, I just don't care about the new characters. I find that, like, when it becomes about the new characters, or when it goes for too long on other characters in Las Vegas or New York, I forget that I'm watching Twin Peaks. And that's just one of the biggest problems I had with The Return is I wanted The Return to be consistent with the first 2 seasons, and it's obviously not. Lynch and Frost obviously threw out all of the consistency and all of that, and they just decided to do whatever they want. And I feel like there's 2 kinds of fans of The Return. Either you care about the consistency or you don't. Well, I do care about the consistency because I love the first 2 seasons, even much of season 2, despite that terrible middle portion. Just because, for me, Twin Peaks was a great work of escapism. You go to this mysterious small town where a murder happens, but there's still so much light, and while trying to navigate through darkness. I don't get that from The Return at all. There's nothing escapist about The Return. I don't feel like I'm escaping anywhere. I feel like I'm jumping all over the map to a bunch of characters with misery in their lives, and I'm sort of thinking, what does all of this mean? How does all of it add up? And then all of a sudden you'll be following characters in Las Vegas or New York for long periods of time, thinking like, okay, whatever. And then all of a sudden, Deputy Hawk appears, and you're like, and he's ripping out a bathroom door, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be watching Twin Peaks. That's what this is trying to be. At least I forgot that this had any ties to an old show whatsoever, because it often feels like Lynch is just trying to make a new kind of thing, like Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway. So yeah, I don't like. I think this part of the show I definitely didn't remember, and I'm eventually gonna get to episode 7, and then of course episode 8, which everyone loves, and I don't remember anything about 7. So, oh yeah, and I'd forgotten about this murderous dwarf that goes around stabbing women with a screwdriver. I'm like, but then I'm like, oh yeah, sort of like the first time you see him, it's an over the shoulder shot. You don't immediately know it's a little guy because of the interesting angle that Lynch shoots him from, like above, and then later he appears and he stabs all those women to death with a screwdriver. I'm like, oh god, like I don't mind the violence that much, but I just sort of am like, I don't get it. What does this have to do with anything? And so it's like I don't remember episode 7. Interesting to get to it, and then we'll do 8. But then after 8, I don't remember anything that happened from episode 9 to episode 15. So I am kind of dreading that long 6-hour stretch of where I sort of felt like the show was dead in the water, and I think that's why I've sort of blocked it out of my memory. I distinctly remember the end of the show. I remember 16, 17, and 18 because Cooper came back in those episodes, and that's why I loved it. But, again, I'm trying to watch these episodes to wear out my frustrations. It's just not easy.